Have you ever found yourself alone in the woods? The world around you swallowed by darkness, every sound amplified by the silence? Imagine the crunch of leaves behind you, the snap of a twig just out of sight, your heart pounding as you realize you're not as alone as you thought. Most people think of the woods as peaceful, maybe even a little boring. But what if I told you that some of the most disturbing, unexplainable things happen far from the safety of city lights? Tonight I'm sharing 3 true stories that will make you question every shadow between the trees. These aren't just campfire tales, they're real encounters, experienced by people who thought they were safe until the woods showed them otherwise. If you think you know what's out there, think again. By the end of this video, you'll never look at the forest the same way. I've always loved hiking alone. There's something about the quiet, the way the world narrows down to the sound of your own footsteps and the wind in the trees. It's peaceful, almost meditative at least. That's what I used to think. Last fall, I decided to spend a weekend camping in the Pine Barrens, a place I'd visited a dozen times before. I knew the trails, the landmarks, even the best spots to set up camp. I thought I knew the woods. I was wrong. The first day was perfect. The air was crisp, the leaves just starting to turn, and the only sounds were birds and the distant rush of a creek. I set up my tent in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, the kind that block out most of the sky. As the sun dipped below the trees, I built a small fire and cooked dinner, feeling that familiar sense of calm settle over me. But as night fell, the woods changed. The silence grew heavier, pressing in from all sides. Every crackle from the fire seemed too loud, every gust of wind too sudden. I tried to read by flashlight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started with small things, a branch snapping in the distance, the rustle of leaves that didn't quite match the wind. I told myself it was just animals, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. It was like the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag and tried to ignore the unease crawling up my spine. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the pine needles just beyond the edge of my camp. My heart hammered in my chest. I held my breath, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, another step, closer this time. I fumbled for my flashlight, hands shaking, shined it toward the trees. Nothing, just endless rows of pines, their trunks like black pillars in the darkness. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was letting the dark get to me. But then I saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, standing perfectly still between 2 trees. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a branch swaying in the wind. But the footsteps started again, circling my camp, always just out of sight. I called out, my voice trembling. "Hello? Is someone there?" Just the sound of my own breathing and the distant, steady crunch of footsteps. I stayed awake the rest of the night, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. Every time I thought the footsteps had stopped, they would start again, always in a different direction. Sometimes they sounded close, other times far away, but never leaving, never getting closer, just watching. When dawn finally broke, the woods looked normal again. Birds chirped, sunlight filtered through the branches, and there was no sign that anything had happened. I packed up my camp in record time, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. As I hiked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every time I stopped, the woods fell silent, as if something was waiting for me to move. I never saw the shadow again, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear those footsteps, slow, patient, always just out of sight. I haven't been camping alone since, and if you ever find yourself in the pines after dark, listen carefully. You might not be as alone as you think. Strange how the woods can make you question what's real and what's just your imagination. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what you see, but what you can't explain. The feeling that something is out there, just beyond the light. But being alone isn't the only way the forest can turn on you. If you thought solitude was terrifying, wait until you hear what happened to a group of friends who thought they were safe together. There's a certain confidence that comes with being in a group. You laugh louder, walk taller, and convince yourself that nothing bad can happen as long as you're not alone. That is exactly how it felt when my friends and I decided to spend a weekend camping in the state forest. There were 5 of us: me, my best friend Tyler, his girlfriend Jess, and 2 others, Mark and Emily. We'd all grown up together, and this trip was supposed to be our last big adventure before college pulled us in different directions. The first night was everything we hoped for. Set up our tents, built a roaring fire, and told stupid ghost stories that had us all rolling our eyes. The woods felt alive, but in a good way. Crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, the distant rush of a creek. We joked about bears and serial killers, but none of us really believed anything bad could happen. Not with all of us together. It was sometime after midnight when things started to change. The fire had burned down 2 glowing embers, and we were all stretched out on our backs, staring up at the stars. That's when we heard it. A scream, sharp and high-pitched, echoing through the trees. At first we thought it was an animal, maybe a fox or a bobcat. But then it came again, louder this time, and it sounded almost human. We all sat up, glancing at each other, trying to laugh it off. "Probably just a coyote," Mark said, but his voice was shaky. Jess pulled her sleeping bag closer around her shoulders. "That didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard," she whispered. The screams kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. They seemed to move through the woods, circling our camp, sometimes close, sometimes far away. Tyler tried to act tough, grabbing a flashlight and insisting we check it out. Against my better judgment, we all followed, sticking close together as we moved through the trees. The woods felt different at night. Every shadow seemed to move. Every branch looked like a claw reaching out to grab us. The screams led us deeper and deeper until we stumbled into a small clearing. That's when we saw it. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, and inside the circle, something had been dragged through the dirt, leaving deep, uneven grooves. At first, I thought it was an animal, but as we got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. The ground was covered in strange symbols, drawn in what looked like ash or charcoal. The air was thick with the smell of something burnt and rotten. We stood there, frozen, as another scream ripped through the night, this time impossibly close. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once, echoing off the trees, vibrating in our bones. Emily started to cry, and Jess grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Suddenly the woods went silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Just the sound of our own breathing and the pounding of our hearts. Then, from the edge of the clearing, we saw movement. A shadow darting between the trees, too fast to be human, too big to be any animal we knew. We ran. I don't remember how we made it back to camp. It's only that we didn't stop until we were zipped inside our tents, shaking and wide-eyed. None of us slept that night. In the morning, the clearing was gone. Searched for it, retraced our steps, but there was nothing. No stones, no symbols, not even a patch of disturbed earth. We never talked about what happened after that trip. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear those screams echoing through the trees. And I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run. It's one thing to be scared when you're alone. There's a different kind of terror when even your friends can't protect you. When you all witness something you can't explain and it follows you long after you leave the woods behind. But as disturbing as that night was, nothing compares to what happened to a forest ranger on patrol. This last story is not for the faint of heart, and it still keeps me up at night. I've worked as a forest ranger for over a decade, and I thought I'd seen it all. Lost hikers, wild animals, even the occasional illegal campsite. The woods can be unpredictable, but I always felt like I understood them, like I was part of their rhythm. That changed last spring, on a night that still makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. It started as a routine patrol. It was covering the north section of the park, a stretch of dense forest that most people avoided. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, and the air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. I remember feeling calm, almost peaceful, as I walked the trail, flashlight in hand, radio clipped to my belt. About a mile in, I noticed something strange, a narrow path veering off the main trail, half hidden by overgrown ferns. I'd never seen it before, and curiosity got the better of me. I followed the path, pushing through branches that snagged at my uniform, until I stumbled into a small clearing. That's when I saw it, an old cabin, weathered and sagging, with a rusted tin roof and boarded-up windows. It looked abandoned, the kind of place you'd expect to find in a ghost story. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. The door was slightly ajar, and there were fresh footprints in the mud, too recent to ignore. I called out, "Park Ranger, anyone in there?" No answer. Just the creak of the door swinging in the breeze. I should have called for backup, but something compelled me to step inside. The air inside was stale and cold, thick with the scent of mold and something metallic. My flashlight beam swept across the room, landing on a table covered in strange symbols, carved deep into the wood. There were scraps of paper scattered everywhere, each one covered in frantic, looping handwriting. Most of it was gibberish, but a few words stood out. Watcher, return, never alone. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The walls were covered in more symbols, drawn in what looked like charcoal or maybe something darker. In the corner, a pile of animal bones was arranged in a spiral, each one meticulously placed. I tried to tell myself it was just some weird art project, maybe a squatter with a taste for the macabre. But then I heard it, a whisper so soft I thought I imagined it at first. My name spoken from somewhere deeper in the cabin. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, closer this time, echoing off the walls. I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The temperature dropped, my breath coming out in white puffs. The symbols on the walls seemed to writhe in the flashlight's beam, twisting and shifting like they were alive. Then the voices started, dozens of them, all whispering at once, overlapping and urgent. Some pleaded, some laughed, some just repeated my name over and over. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices only grew louder, filling my head with static and fear. I stumbled backward, tripping over the pile of bones, and landed hard on the floor. That's when I saw the figure in the doorway, a tall, shadowy shape, its face hidden in darkness. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with eyes that seemed to glow in the gloom. I scrambled to my feet, desperate to get out, but every time I tried the door, it wouldn't budge. The voices rose to a fever pitch, and the figure stepped closer, its outline flickering like a bad signal. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was trapped, the next I was running through the woods, branches whipping at my face, lungs burning. When I finally reached my truck, the sun was rising, and the cabin was nowhere to be found. I searched for it later, retraced my steps, but there was nothing. No path, no clearing, no sign that it had ever existed. I still patrol those woods, but I never go near that part of the park anymore. Sometimes late at night, I hear whispers on the wind, calling my name. And I wonder if the Watcher is still out there waiting for someone else to find his cabin. If you ever see a path you don't recognize, turn back. Some places in the woods aren't meant to be found. There's something about the woods that taps into a fear we all share. It's the fear of what's hidden, just out of sight of the things that move in the darkness, when we think we're alone. Maybe it's the silence, or the way the trees seem to close in around you, swallowing every sound except your own heartbeat. Or maybe it's the knowledge that, no matter how well you think you know the forest, there are always places and stories that defy explanation. The people in these stories thought they were safe, alone, with friends, or even as seasoned professionals. But the woods have a way of reminding us how small and vulnerable we really are. Some mysteries never get solved, and some encounters never leave you, no matter how far you run. If you've ever experienced something strange or unexplainable in the woods, I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below, and let's see just how many secrets these forests are hiding. And remember, next time you hear a twig snap behind you or catch a shadow moving between the trees, don't be so sure it's just your imagination. You might not be alone.